So shall we start, sir? Let Dean sir, Akhil sir join. हेलो, उनको बोलिए कि लिंक भेजा मैंने वापस. ये लोग भी सेम. हाँ, ये लोग भी सेम करो.
Rajesh sir.
Yes sir.
Yes, sir,
just a minute, sir. Dean sir is, yeah. Dean sir is joining, sir. Okay. Hello. नहीं तो इधर ही बुला लीजिए सर. हेलो हेलो ब्रिजेश सर, भेजा हुआ है, भेज दिया मैं. वो उन्होंने भी भेजा है, मैंने भी भेज दिया है. हाँ अभी इधर ही बुला लो ना. ऐसा तो टाइम स्टार्ट हो गया. टाइम मैं उधर चल जाता हूँ. Yes sir, now we are going to start. Okay. Hello sir, shall I start?
Yes, Rajesh sir, you can begin.
Good evening, ma'am. I am Dr. Rajesh Singh from Parul University. I am an associate professor in this university. A warm welcome to Priya Aristotle, madam, and she is going to give us a guidelines on the 7 lamps of ethical advocacy. She is having a practice of 20 years in the Supreme Court of India, and having a all matters, say for example family matters, then so just I will give to Akhil sir to warm welcome our Dean Akhil Saiyyed sir. Warm welcome Priya madam. Akhil sir.
Thank you, Dr. Rajesh. Namaskar, Priya ma'am. It's a great pleasure to welcome you at Parul Institute of Law. On behalf of Parul Institute of Law and Faculty of Law, and on my personal behalf, I welcome you, ma'am. It's great pleasure that you have this very excellent and a special type of topic for today's webinar. I am really very much happy and pleased with the title itself. I am sure that the student and as well as other lawyers here in the state of Gujarat will definitely benefited with your kind words. Thank you. Welcome to Parul University.
Very warm welcome, ma'am. Actually, just I want to just say about ma'am. She is very hardworking, and personally, I have practiced under her in various matters. She always teaches me. So it is a great privilege that Parul University is having this platform, and all the students of Parul University and across the Gujarat lawyers will also get benefited. So I am handing this session to Priya Aristotle, madam. Priya, ma'am.
Yes, sir. A very warm welcome to everybody. Thank you, Rajesh, so much. Thank you, Brajesh, sir, and everyone in the university for this opportunity. It's a privilege actually to talk to students, especially the young generation who are going to be the next fraternity taking the legal ethics forward. Especially this is the hour of need And I just want to start by sharing my personal experience as a lawyer. When I first moved from Chennai to Bangalore and started my practice, the first day in my church, I found a lot of people staring at me and they asked me, what am I doing? When I said I'm a lawyer, they were looking at me with shock and they said, how come in a church? And I said, sinners belong to the church, I guess. So there is a lot of controversy about how advocates can practice with some ethics. And in fact, when I was just Googling for some jokes on ethical advocacy, the first thing that came up was ethical advocacy is an oxymoron. So that is the standard which things have dropped down, though it's called a noble profession with a noble calling. And ethics is something that is required by every person. It's basic human nature. And every profession, there is ethics. But there is a higher calling and requirement for lawyers, because we literally uphold every other person accountable, whether they have been standing up to the ethical standards, be it in the medical profession or in the accounts or anywhere else. So Stephen Covey, in fact, says moral authority comes from following universal and timeless principles like honesty, integrity, and treating people with respect. So the authority which we have as lawyers also come from the values that we possess. And these values, I think God has given us in our conscience itself. We have been made people with moral values and good conscience, and our parents at home, our elders, and everybody groom us into it. And there is a subject called professional ethics even in our colleges to inculcate these values inside us. And when you take also, you have a subject on it called professional ethics, which comes under the Advocates Act. So there's not much which we could actually talk about it, except to encourage every student who is going to the future advocate and get into the front of stand firm on their beliefs, on which they are growing into. And that is what is going to make them as strong advocates, because the modern human race has almost forgotten the ethical values. And as advocates, if we do not stand, there is going to be a difficult time to establish law. And if you want to succeed in law, you need to be ethical. And as Sir Abdul Parry, who's written the book 7 Lamps of Advocacy, it was written in 1923, but what was good then is good now also. He says, for the case of moderns that may care for nothing, none of these things, he is lighting the path again, using the principles of what has been for the successful judges and jurists and advocates. For, he says, without a free, honorable race of advocates, the world will hear little of the message of justice. And he goes on to say that advocate is a priest in the temple of justice, trained in mysteries of creed, active in its exercise. And he goes on to quote from the Bible, 1 John 2, where he says that Jesus is our advocate for justice. So advocacy is always associated with justice. And as advocates, if we want to establish justice and the rule of law, we need to follow certain ethical principles. And they are divided basically into 7 lamps according to Parry. And the lamps are a lamp of honesty, the lamp of courage, the lamp of industry, the lamp of wit, the lamp of eloquency, the lamp of judgment, and the lamp of fellowship. And in the center of everything is a lamp of honesty. And according to Thomas Jefferson, honesty is the first chapter in the book of wisdom. The principles which require us to give everyone his due. This is honesty. You need to give everyone their very due, and the very object of social order promote honesty and to restrain dishonesty and to do justice and prevent injustice. And in fact, when I was a young lawyer and started my practice, I remember some of my clients were very senior gentlemen who could have easily contacted some senior lawyers. But they felt very comfortable for one thing, that they know that young lawyers are not into the stream of being dishonest and earning for money. So as young lawyers, when you get into the profession, people will look at you for integrity first. And you will have clients who, these gentlemen just told me, we do not know whether you will be having the experience to win or lose a case, but one thing we know, we can trust you. You will not be joining the other side. And because you haven't learned these kind of craftsmanship yet. And we have seen many of these famous lawyers. Abraham Lincoln's story, which I was reading, he was called as someone with perverse honesty. Because the first time he appeared, I believe he told the judge everything about his case. And every authority which will point opposite to his case, because actually maybe he did not have a good case, but he was so honest. And we know that is a kind of leader we need for our nation to lead. And some of the advocates have gone to become big politicians. So it is that kind of a value which we need to set for each one of us. And it is your honesty should be so much that if there is a particular case which is against you, you need to bring it to the notice of the court also. And it's only knowledge. Your knowledge needs to be improved so much that you will be aware of the cases which are for you and against you. And very honestly, we need to present ourselves. Because advocate, we must remember, we are not only the servant of the client, but we are friend of the court. And honesty is one of the essential traits of friendships and of sound advocacy. And the next lamp is a lamp of courage. And I believe that honesty begets courage. A person who is honest will always be courageous to stand up and speak for what is right, because he knows what is right and what is wrong. And to Jeffries, the chief qualities of a lawyer are boldness, boldness, and boldness. Modern advocate, kindly reproving a junior for his timidity and wise manner, says that it is better to be strong and wrong than to be weak and right. But if we do not able to express ourselves, then it looks like we are wrong. Because we know the psychology of people. When you talk boldly, it looks like you're always right. But when you're hesitant and you don't know how to express yourself, there is an impression that we get wrong also. So as advocates, we need to speak boldly. And this boldness also comes from knowledge. Where you have knowledge, you are bold. Where you know what is right, what is wrong, you are bold. And learning begets courage. And wise knowledge. And when I think of boldness, I can only remember Justice Khanna. I think all of us know that he stood up what was right. And it is because of him that I think we still are a democratic nation. At the cost of the post of CGI, he took a stand against the government and against his colleagues also, and won the admirations of the citizens now. And his name has become immortal. And he knows that what is the beauty and joy of being bold. And boldness comes with knowledge, as I told you. So the next is a lamp of industry. Work, work, work. Work becomes a lifestyle, a habit, a second nature to most of the advocates, as you could have seen, the seniors, how they work. And it is a good habit. They say it is better to wear out than to rust out. So you need to work so much that you really wear out in our profession, because it is a profession where you learn every day. We literally learn every day. Again, Abraham Lincoln was known for his zealous industry, and he would always be found literally sleeping with his books and over his files. And even if it was the smallest of small case, he would be working very hard on it. And he would be giving advice to every student who came across him. And only one advice which would ring in his ears is work, work, work. One more person whom I remember is reading about Nani Palkiwala, a legendary, and I was so engrossed as these days we find lawyers almost loitering around the courts, whether they have work or not much work. But I was amazed to read that this great man of law never was found loitering in the corridors or even wouldn't wait to sip a cup of tea in the canteens of the court. He was so hardworking. He would finish his work, get back to his chambers, and would continue to do his work. And his brother was once had given a testimony about him, sharing that all night he would sit and work even on the simplest of cases. And I think true to the word, like, you live like a hermit and work like a horse. That was something which Palkiwala lived. And we all still admire, and some of the landmark cases which he said are something which are a benefit or a side thing of his hard work. Next is the lamp of wit. And as advocates, sometimes we tend to become so stereotyped, monotonous, because the kind of cases we read, the books we read, and everything. But out of all the hard work and the wisdom that we acquire, wit is one of the natural quality of a human being, which we could probably inculcate by reading a kind of stories or anything, because we find we still, as even adults, enjoy the story of Birbal and Tenali Raman, who are known for their wit and wisdom. Because where there is wisdom, I believe the kind of confidence which is manifested, which will automatically beget of wisdom in the person. And as advocates, which is so much of a stressful job which we go through, and the heated arguments in the court, the nature of being witty is something that is going to be a big blessing to the advocate. So as students, you could probably read that kind of books, and if you're basically a person with a lot of sense of humor and wit, you could inculcate in such a way that you could put it into practice by talking with your friends or in mood courts and in other atmospheres. You could start using this beautiful quality of yours. And there is a small incident which is narrated about a judge who would work so hard that he did not even get Good Friday holiday. And so the who wanted to represent and want a holiday, they said, if your lordship pleases, you could work on a Good Friday, but your lordship will be the first judge that has done so since Pontius Pilate. And the court adjourned till Saturday. So there was a very witty way of this gentleman putting it across, and the judge had to heed to it. And in the courts, practically, I haven't found in this generation or in my practice somebody known for his wit. But I read historically, Daftari was a gentleman with a great sense of humor and wit, and he would take the courage to speak boldly in front of the judges, also with his wit nature. And Fali Nariman has recollected in one of his that when Chagla, justice, was presiding in the Constitution challenge at the Prohibition Act case, asked Daftari in course of the argument about the nature of the intoxicant declared prohibited under the Act. And Daftari described them, and then with a mischievous twinkle in his eyes, he added, and then, my lords, there are substances other than liquid refreshments which also intoxicate, and that power is one of them. I mean, the whole court burst out laughing, definitely, but it was a very nice way. And the times when Daftari would go to the rescue of some of the junior colleagues because of the sense of wit and the court situation a little lighter. And the lamp of wit upon the altar of justice would really would add beauty to the courts. That is what I would say. And the next lamp is a lamp of eloquency. And eloquency is something which comes with our language. And being in India, though English is not our mother tongue, we have literally made it our second mother tongue. I think in most of our homes also, where we have got convent education and some of these very good English schools, literally children speak English. Even my own children, they speak more of English than they don't even know what is their mother tongue properly. And it's also because our profession demands it. a profession demands that we have eloquent language and skills, so we continue to practice it in our everyday life, and that is the way we have been brought up, because it's also the official language of the court, so subconsciously we tend to practice. And I remember reading about Lord Dennings. He said that pianists, how they practice music, like that he practices eloquency of language by reading various literatures. So for Lord Dennings, whose mother tongue itself is English naturally, when he has put in so much of hard work, how much more should we be doing it? We need to think the language, we need to talk the language, we need to use it in every day of our things so that our vocabulary would increase. Because without the flow of language, art of talking and the person listening, the beauty is not there at all. And it has definitely a psychological effect on advocacy. When you eloquently speak, there is a charm in the voice and manners which will be definitely rewarded when you speak eloquently, because the hard work that you have put in, all the industry, your wit, wisdom, whatever you want to convey, comes out through that fine language which you are going to speak. The sincerity of your heart, whatever you're going to convey, whatever is running in your mind, all the practices that you have done, the materials that you've collected in your head is going to just come out. And your language should not be just so full of flowery and fascinating just to impress people. But I believe a true lawyer would just not touch the mind of the judge, but he would definitely touch the heart of the judge. And that is something which comes with practice. Some of these habits for most people would be natural, but it could be inculcated in people. They could go for special classes to build up their language skills, read a lot of storybooks. I'm sure a lot of people who read could easily frame their thoughts, what they are reading, into words, and it could flow out more easily just because they are able to connect well with their thoughts and their language. So there is no rule or method, but the principle to remember is that the message of eloquency is to address to the heart rather than to the brain. So you need to improve on your language, not only as a language, but as a means where you could learn to convey what is in your very heart and all the hard work that you have put. And then once you reach the heart, the person who's going to impress is going to definitely follow what you're going to say, and your eloquence is going to impress them so much that you will be able to you would have conveyed what you want to say to them, and you wouldn't be stumbling for words. And there are a lot of materials these days, even on YouTube, and a lot of books like never before. There is in fact, an overflooding of knowledge these days everywhere. And next is a lamp of judgment, which we would see. And this is something, again, which comes with a lot of experience. And we have seen a lot of juniors sitting around and writing a lot of notes, and they are called along with the seniors. But instead of writing notes, I think we need to just sit and observe the court, how it is being handled by the seniors, and how skillfully they are working through it, because judgment comes with experience. That is why we find a lot of seniors only being designated in the post of judges, and a lot of senior advocates bringing out the best in their profession, because it comes with experience, and it also comes with a lot of acquired knowledge. So a lot of reading has to go through, and sound judgment. When you're of sound judgment, you would be able to confidently face the clients also, because the first time when they come across when they come to you with a file, you're supposed to be reading every piece of paper. They could think it is useful or not useful, but as an advocate, your judgment will be good enough for you to decipher what is required, what is not required, and it is for you to tell the client also honestly where they stand. a lot of judgment is also something which you learn from your seniors. So it is very important that you join a good office where there are a lot of cases, so that you could really work on those cases and read the kind of judgments, the precedents and the logics that were involved in these judgments. And that and is a lamp of fellowship, strength of any young and old advocate. This is one profession where your advocacy skills are weighted and watched for eternity. And the fellow advocates are the ones who actually inspire you, they correct you, and with every performance that we do, when they applaud you, that is the best joy that you can ever receive as a professional, more than the fees which your client is giving. And as young advocates, that is something which we look forward after an argument when we walk out of the courts. And also there is a lot of encouragement from other lawyers who come across to your rescue. And I think fellowship is something which is the most beautiful thing that is there only in our profession, because as advocates who practice exclusively in Supreme Courts or High Courts or in trial courts, you get to associate with so many of your friends, your colleagues with whom you studied, and others, and senior advocates who really help us to uplift. And you sit and watch the proceedings, and then you clarify your doubts with them. There's a kind of fellowship. And this is something like the trade unions, I feel. When we handle trade unions, they always address each other as brothers. And probably that kind of a unity is what is found even in our fraternity. And that is why probably we call each other brothers-in-law and sister so-and-so. And it is the senior members of the bar who actually train the juniors through the professional skills and their crafts. Literally, some of the juniors have taken to specialization because of the kind of seniors and the admirations which they have for senior colleagues. And it is said that no man ever attains a position at the bar in which he can afford to despise the opinion of his fellow men. And even when we are arguing, sometimes we have to face the opponents who are probably our friends or somebody we do not like also. It doesn't matter. But then how you reach out across to them matters a lot while you are arguing, because they are your fellow advocates. And when we were speaking about wit, sometimes we need to have a distinction between what is wit and what is sarcasm, what is speaking ironically, what is hurting others. So wit is something which you really add joy to the other person and change the court atmosphere. But a lot of time we forget that we are fellow advocates and brothers, and there's a lot of probably mood to win the case at any cost. So what the present day situation we find in the courts is pulling down each other, trying to have temper arguments so that the other person's flow of thought is also disturbed. It has become a rather trend for people to just stand up, show discord, and even after court, there is a kind of not a pleasant atmosphere between advocates at times. We look at each other as adversaries. But I think we should continue to have this lamp of fellowship lit always. In fact, I was just reading in the olden days why this fellowship came was because of the relationship with the fraternity, the fellow senior and junior lawyers. They used to have a lot of fun time in the bar. They used to have special occasions and a lot of things like, which I don't want to narrate because it was more of the Western culture. But then that's what has come into here also. So fellowship is something which we cannot afford to lose. And as the saying goes, strive mightily, but eat and drink as friends. For it is by keeping the lamp of fellowship burning that we encourage each other to walk in the light of the 7 lamps of advocacy. And I just want to conclude by what I read in Black's Legal Dictionary, that each lawyer must find within his own conscience the touchstone against which to test the extent to which his actions should raise above minimum standards. But in the last analysis, it is a desire for respect and the confidence of the members of his profession and of the society which he should serve that should provide to a lawyer the incentive for the highest possible degree of ethical conduct. The possible loss of that respect and confidence in the ultimate sanction. So long as the practitioners are guided by these principles, the law will continue to be a noble profession. This is its greatness and its strength, which permit of no compromise. And apart from these ethical qualities, I remember reading about Krishna Iyer, who said tact is one of the qualities which every lawyer should have. And yes, when to speak, what to speak, how to speak. And again, tact comes with experience alone. So I think that is why they give the senior counsel gown after you're 40, so that you have that number of experience which easily comes with you. And that is what the gray hair of the advocate is all about. And I remember my senior used to be telling, the first 5 years of your practice, it's all work and no pay. And the second 5 years of your practice is a little pay and a lot of, and it's the third years of your practice, start seeing a lot of money and little hard work. It's a lot of hard work that goes down the way. Disturbance?
No, ma'am. It is coming. Your voice is coming fluently. There is no problem.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Apart from these basic qualities, there is something which I would like to emphasize as a good lawyer, which is required, and that is compassion. Unless you have compassion for what your client is going through, you will not be able to reach out to them. And this is something which, again, these days is lacking, because the profession has become so much like we're just targeting how to be ambitious, how to be rich, and there is no limits to it at all. Selfish nature of man is growing so much that it is very painful to see in our profession. More than the nobility of it, it has become more of a money-making profession. I think when you have a lot of good qualities, money will automatically flow through behind. So one of the basic quality, because the client comes to you with an expectation that you would understand what he is going through, the pains of what he has been through in these umpteen number of years, and the relationship has to be maintained, because we know the time and the effort that is going on in the courts. Sometimes the litigation just drags on for umpteen number of years, after the trial court, the high court, and the Supreme Court. So the person with whom he most relates with once he steps into the court is the lawyer. And so a compassionate nature is something that is going to keep the relationship moving. And you will also be able to be a good lawyer by trying to give in your best because of your compassionate nature, and you would be not dilly-dallying or trying to take too much of dates like most of the lawyers and things that are going around, but because of your nature that you really empathize with him. The fee structure, I think a lot of things go into it when you have a compassionate nature. And I think the best advertisements for us is given by our own clients more than because I think as lawyers, we are not even permitted to advertise. So the best advertisers would be our clients. So when you reach out to them with compassion, it's going to work out beautifully. And then availability is something which we also have to keep in mind, that we need to be available for our clients. We need to set boundaries. We need to draw margins, of course, about our timing of availability. But this is something that is very required, because I remember trying to brief a senior counsel along with my husband in one particular case. And though we were lawyers and he was such a busy advocate, we were made to stand out to almost till 11, 12 o'clock in the middle of the night. And it was very disturbing. I mean, we understand advocates are very busy, seniors are very busy, but the joy of being treated professionally is something which any human being would really appreciate. So these are some things which you could inculcate as a matter of routine, as a matter of habit. And yes, there's one thing which I would like to say. During the course of our profession, as we could be bombarded by our clients, could be bombarded by the other side for certain reasons. Maybe they do not know the etiquettes of the court, or for whatever reason, or we could have even failed in some of ways we could have handled the cases. Or there were times when, having been bombarded by the judge himself because of whatever reason. So there's a nature of us which should learn to forgive and keep moving on. Forgive probably the people who hurt us in the profession, and also ourselves if we have in some ways failed to keep up to. There were times when even I would prepare something and go and would have missed speaking that particular point of law. So I think we need to learn to be generous even with ourselves and just move on. And yes, as fellow advocates, we need to encourage one another. Encouragement is one quality which is going to pay you off very well, because they say what you teach, you retain in your mind. So you could just sit in the libraries and discuss with your friends some of the case laws which have come up and encourage them. If they have a case, you could sit along and work with them. I understand I'm talking to a set of students, but then I'm looking at you all as young advocates who are going to step in, and you need a lot of encouragement. So one way is to encourage each other. So probably team up and handle those new cases and encourage each other to learn something new and share it along the way. And there's one more quality called honor. We all honor our teachers. We honor our friends. We need to honor even the judges in the courts. And I think we give a lot of due and respect to even the precedents which were set by some of the famous advocates. So honor is a beautiful quality. And when you talk respectfully to the judge and with honor, any person is going to listen patiently and admirably to what you're going to speak. And the next is acceptance. I think I would title the acceptance quality both for the clients and for the other side advocates. Sometimes there are advocates who are not so pleasing to argue against also, but we need to know that that is their basic nature and you cannot change them. But how do you keep your dignity while you just accept them and present the case and continue without your mood swings being troubled by the other person is something you need to learn. And these things are all a kind of habits. And the last quality I would say is submission. We are all here to submit ourselves to law, to the right decorum of the courts, and to the judges and to our fellow advocates. So these are some of the qualities which again we could inculcate. And as students, every student is bold, every student is hardworking. So these are some of the qualities which you could on a daily basis inculcate into your routines, have a little discipline, and you're sure to shine, because hard work definitely pays off. And all the qualities that you all have, especially I would say these youngsters, instead of wasting much time on the video and other things which are so much prone these days, you could spend a lot more time in reading and building up all your qualities and these natures so that it could be second nature for you. And then practicing would become more beautiful. And I think that's why our profession is called practice. We need to not only practice law, but practice ethics, ethical advocacy, and you could learn a lot more, read a lot more, so that your practice could become more proficient. What you practice more and more, and it becomes your second nature. I would just want to conclude. I would just want to conclude by just saying that, yes, we want to succeed in whatever cases we take up. But one thing we need to know is the value which you have, as much as you practice and you have inculcated as students into you, would also start diminishing if you have the wrong kind of circle and the wrong kind of influence, and that's going to affect you a lot. So I would suggest that you keep the beautiful innocent qualities as students as you grow and get into the profession, and you be the role model. Probably these days I would say I haven't found much of a role model for myself also to look up to, but you could be the role model because you're the next generation. And one thing we all need to know is more than winning and living for a minute, I think just like how Justice Khanna was bold and standing up, he's still immortal, and he could literally, the whole country could look up to what he did at that point of time. And that is something which we all need to look up to as role models, probably somebody. And you could be that one. And one thing is, we are all accountable, because it's just the judge or the favorable judgment, but there is a judgment day, and we should act according to our conscience. We should do our best for our client, but at the same time know that we are also answerable to somebody on the final day. So God bless you all, and I pray that you will be a generation who will stand up for truth, honesty, and which will raise up to be a new generation, setting up new trends and being the best role model. With all the technology and all the facilities available and new challenges, it's going to be an exciting generation. I'm looking forward to it. God bless you.
Madam, it was so fantastic session by you. You are elaborating all the points like lamps of fellowship. You have elaborated in a very fantastic way with all the quotes you have quoted. It was very fantastic one. Madam, my one humble question. Now, you know, when right now my students are getting in the course, so they are having a lots of fear. Okay, and you know the seniors, they have a fear with the seniors also. So what the student should do, that they should not, because one question one student has asked me to ask you that if suppose he has just joined the profession and he has a lots of years, so what he has to do in the initial stage so that he can cope up with the things very easily with the seniors.
Yes, I understand what this dear student is asking, because even I'm a first generation lawyer. So even I had a lot of fear. So when I joined my senior's office, I asked him, actually I'm from Chennai. So when I settled in Bangalore, and now of course we are in Delhi, my senior just said one thing: as long as you are useful to the office will be useful to you. And as far as the law goes, it's the same. And law is nothing but common sense. So that gave me a lot of confidence. And he encouraged me to read a lot of books and acquire that kind of a knowledge. And I remember, because I was an ardent reader, so some of the new clients and the new cases which came up, when they asked for research, they would point out immediately to me and say, she is hardworking, just give it to her. So the kind of feedback which you as a student could give with that kind of knowledge, then you will become invincible. That will automatically give you the boldness and the confidence. And this is something, I remember there was a person who was preaching and who said, do it afraid. So even if you're afraid, just go ahead and do it. And I think everybody, even however senior a person is, there is always a kind of anxiety that is there. I've seen that even in the most senior counsels. When they argue the matter, the fear is there. But that is something, whether you're going to budge down or whether you're going to stand up against it, that's going to be the decision. And I think it is in your very hands, your own fate.
Madam, one more question, that as per the that lamp of judgment. So one student has asked me that if suppose in the court they are writing the judgments, but as per your lecture that you should not write, but you should listen very carefully. But certain times what will happen, suppose any good matter is there, so they will just incorporate the latest judgment so that they can go at home and read at certain point. So what do you suggest, that whether they have to make a proper notes, or they have to just read the judgments, whatever was incorporated in the arguments?
Okay, that is where the student's own judgment has to come into play. They need to know at what point of time should they be observing the court, because a lot of interaction happens between the judges and the senior advocates, and the spontaneous reactions given by the senior advocates and the answers is something worth observing and learning, because advocates have to think on their feet. You may go preparing a lot of things overnight, but what the judge expects would be totally different from you. So these are the things which an advocate as a junior will have to sit and observe in the court, so that they mentally get tuned to it and their minds get sharper. But reading is a whole different exclusive thing. So that is where I think the judgment part also, they need to start exercising at what point they should listen and what are the things they should sit and write and make down notes for.
Ma'am, it is very beautiful and very fantastic lecture by you, and our students have enlightened us with your speech. Thank you, ma'am. Thanks you for giving a good time to us, to our university. We are always, and we would also like that, as I know that sir is also a fantastic lawyer, so I would like to invite him also one day. At suppose his tight schedule is there, so it is really a pleasure to us, ma'am. And our president will also have one note, and we will present with our president also this whole YouTube video to all our entire students, so that if suppose any student have missed out, they can also listen and get the knowledge. Thanks a lot, madam. Thanks a lot from entire Parul Institute of Law. Thanks a lot, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Brijesh ji.